The cool, dark night seemed to wrap around me in an uncomfortable embrace, even though I was wearing a sweatshirt and the heaviest jacket that I owned. It was still nothing compared to the frigid cold that seemed to shoot right through the fibers of my clothes. I sat trembling on the park bench as I glanced down at my watch. 9:30. He was late. An hour and a half late, to be exact. I'm not even sure why I'm still waiting. But here I sit, unable to come to terms with the fact that he isn't going to show up, I guess. He's only someone I met online, so I guess it's not the end of the world, but still, how many dates bailing can one person take? It's not like I'm looking for anything serious, just someone to have for dinner for a couple nights a week. As bothersome as online dating is, it's a good way to stay anonymous if you should need to. In this case, it's rather important. Well, I guess he isn't coming, and I've reached my limit of looking like a fool, so I guess I'll head home. Just as I stood to walk away, I heard a voice call out behind me. "Jocelyn? It's me, David. I'm so sorry I'm late. I went to the wrong park," he said, looking rather embarrassed. So he didn't bail on me. Just got mixed up on what park to go to. Well, that makes me feel a little better anyway. Looking at him, though, I'm glad he decided to stick around. He has enough meat on his bones to last me for days. "Hello, David. Do you want to come back to my place for dinner?" I asked, showing him my best seductive look that I can manage to pull off. To my luck, it seemed to work like a charm. So here we are, walking back to my house, and I only have 2 blocks to make up my mind if I want to fry his meat or cook it in the oven. I'm leaning more towards a stew with potatoes and carrots at this point. "We should make my last day legendary," David told me with a smile. He hadn't told anyone else in the school that he was moving away in the middle of February. What if everyone thought that Bloody Mary took me away? The plan was brilliant. After class, he and I would announce that we would summon the ghost in the mirror, and he'd slip out the window. It was a short reach down to the second-floor balcony, and he would climb onto it, sneak down the stairs, and walk home. I would come out and announce that Bloody Mary had taken him into the other world, and no one would ever see him again. There were at least 24 people who gathered around on that Friday after school. David and I were barely able to contain our smirks as we went into the bathroom alone. "You know, we should at least try it," I explained. "That way we won't be lying when we say we attempted to bring forth the ghost." He blanched just a little. Okay, I suppose so." I boldly stepped in front of the mirror. He tentatively stood next to me. "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, I killed your son." His voice echoed mine. We stared into our reflections. We blinked. So did they. Nothing happened. We both let out a sigh of relief. "I'd better get out of here," David offered. "It's time." He put one leg up on the sink and one on the open window before offering me a last goodbye. "See ya," he said with a smile. He looked down and shifted his weight in order to position himself for the window escape. He was halfway out when I decided that I couldn't resist. "Boo!" I shouted at him as I jumped forward. His eyes shot up immediately and betrayed a moment of terror. Honestly, I hadn't meant to make him slip. David fell through the window and out of sight before I could react. Oh great, I thought, now we'll have to deal with a twisted ankle. I walked over to the window and peeked my head through. David's head was impaled sideways on a metal pole that had once been a part of a chain-link fence. He must have fallen 15 feet. It ran temple to temple. The top of the pole was coated in blood, and the tip of it had brain goop resting on it. His legs were twitching like he was running in place, but the pole held him firm. It wiggled as his legs danced. His eyes never closed. I think that Bloody Mary really did get us in the end. At least that's what I told everyone. I said that David got so spooked at what he saw after the incantation and jumped out the window. And I see David's killer every time I look in the mirror. Have you ever had a loud neighbor, a needy neighbor, a noisy neighbor? That neighbor who made you want to actually leave your whole entire neighborhood because of them? Well, my neighbor was the worst one of them all. It all started last year when my daughter started first grade of school, which is supposed to be a milestone in both of our lives. But it was quickly demolished by my next-door neighbor, Shane. Right before she'd get on the school bus, I'd always see him chatting with her through the window of his pickup truck. And let me tell you, it would literally give me the creeps each and every single time I'd witness it. Well, on one Sunday afternoon, my daughter was playing on the front lawn when that same exact man approached her. But instead of laughing like she always does, she ended up running to me on the other side of the lawn, telling me that he said he wanted her to help him go find his dog, Mac. This left me in complete shock. I mean, I always knew that he was trouble, but definitely not on this type of level, though. If I'd known, I wouldn't have let it get this far. After a quick call to the authorities, he was questioned and then handcuffed into the police car. I tried to tell my daughter that everything was going to be all right, despite being completely horrified myself. I mean, if he kept on bonding with her, he'd be destined to learn that the house fire I secretly started years ago didn't actually kill his then baby, that now I have his dog too. Chad peered out through his window, which was covered in streaks of rain. Visibility outside was close to zero, being obscured by torrents of raindrops. On the subject of these raindrops, it was 5 in the evening when it happened. No warning or anything. The sky suddenly rumbled like it was being torn apart. The rain came with a force comparable to 1,000 rivers, each slashing against the face of the earth like a sea of angry knives. The storm was so unexpected, so sudden, and so lethal. Chad watched as the rain began to take people. Someone outside let loose a guttural scream as his stomach burst and his intestines began pouring out. Desperately clawing at them in an attempt to keep them in, he jerked his head and stared at Chad. His eyes were as red as his blood. His mouth opened in what must have been a plea for help before he collapsed and his skull smashed into the concrete. Chad's only daughter was caught in the storm. She most likely met a similar fate. The news was broadcasting desperately to anyone lucky to be indoors like Chad. They issued a warning never to step outside or open any windows or doors. The rain having claimed billions of lives, each contained millions of identified microspores and would dig into human skin to germinate in their insides before bursting out, like an alien invasion. Graphic videos of people in labs screaming as tiny lobster-like creatures poured out of their rash-covered skin were played. The internet was covered with conspiracy theories of government weapons, alien invasions, and of course, the end of the world. Shaking these thoughts from his memory, Chad stared at his window, contemplating opening and letting death embrace him. All connections and phone lines had died after the events, and Chad's stocks were running low. Death by rain sounded better than death by starvation. It was then when Chad noticed a silhouette outside his front door. His daughter stood outside, smiling at him. Other than being completely drenched, she was fine. Opening the door in blinded relief, Chad smiled as she pulled him into the rain. I'll cut to the chase. I'm a cannibal. I don't know how many of the meals I ate at the Dawson family diner actually contained pieces of the late Mrs. Dawson, but I'm certain I helped Mr. Dawson dispose of some evidence. The story of how Mrs. Dawson ended up in those meals is gruesome, but I suppose that's to be expected. There were always rumors around the town that their marriage was on the rocks, but every town has gossip like that. In this case, though, the rumors were true. The way I heard it, Mr. Dawson was having an affair with one of the waitresses. Mrs. Dawson found out and confronted him about it. In the heat of the moment, he struck her with one of those heavy cast-iron pans he was cleaning. Mr. Dawson now had a body on his hands, which he decided to dispose of the only way he knew how. For 2 months he served her and we ate her. It's not like he ever dropped hints, ever went on about how exotic and fresh his meats were. He just smiled, asked about your family, and served you a piece of his wife. And if anyone asked about Mrs. Dawson, then she was up north visiting her family. Like I said, there were rumors, so nobody questioned it. It was the health inspector who got him in the end. Large, unmarked freezers in the back rooms tend to draw their attention, and Mr. Dawson was in handcuffs by the end of the day. As you might imagine, learning all this turned me off eating meat for a while, but that wasn't why I became a vegetarian. No, that came a few weeks later, when I tried to eat a burger for the first time since the Dawson family diner had shut down. I was nervous, but I was tired of eating salad, so I took a bite. Memories of the diner came flooding back, but not the kind I expected. The meat at the diner had been so rich and flavorful. This was like chewing through greasy cardboard. I threw the burger away and spent the whole night wishing I could have another bite to eat at the Dawson family diner. I sat alone in my office where it was quiet. Many days I'd clock in, shut my office door, and finish my work sheltered in the silent privacy of my office afforded. I'd been at my desk almost 2 hours. I stopped typing when I noticed how muted the hallway near my door had become. I could no longer hear talking between cubicles or shuffling feet of busy workers, or even phones loudly ringing across desks. The air seemed to have muffled as well, a quiet static that I felt on my neck. A strange unease echoed in the hairs now standing on my arms. My ears suddenly alert and attentive. I stood up and walked out, pulling the door behind me. It shut with a soft click. I stepped into the hallway and walked towards the front of the building. Every office I passed was empty, the hallways deserted. I treaded into another hallway, confused, tension in my legs as I continued towards the doors. Rather than process my confusion, I had one thought. Inexplicably, I need to leave. This urge came when I had stopped typing. An impulse telling me that something was off. The quiet, the empty offices, the realization that I was the only one left in the building, and yet the chilling idea that somehow I was not alone. In an adjacent hallway, a door opened, disrupting the silence, shuffling on its hinges. It closed again with a clap. I froze before deciding not to investigate. I walked quickly towards the entrance of the building. I heard footsteps, then perhaps 10 feet behind. I walked faster. I did not turn around. I felt fear. I focused my mind. I need to leave. I heard the footsteps faster than my own, following me as I began to run. The sun poured through the doors as I reached out and pushed the handles, exiting to the parking lot. I squinted my eyes as I glanced back towards the entrance of the building. I saw a man, a black silhouette, barely distinguishable through the doors, but his face peered at me, pale lips drawn tight beneath an ill-defined nose. His eyes dark, yet moving, swirling, 2 black orbs pressed into his head. I stifled my urge to scream, react to the terror I felt as he pressed his face against the glass, inspecting me. I remembered suddenly my urge to leave. I ran forward through an empty lot, towards the only vehicle still parked, my car. I closed in on my vehicle as I glanced around, back towards the doors. He stood, face against the glass, thin body outlined by the door, only watching. His gaze shook me. I stopped focusing. My mind churned, agitated by confusion, working to understand what this man was, or where my co-workers have gone, or why I had left my car keys inside my office.
If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.